Today I'm going to share a little art repair project. This is a piece of artwork I made years ago after I was inspired by Joseph Cornell to try my hand at box making. It features the constellation Aquarius here, made out of wooden pieces that have been painted and glued together. Unfortunately, I didn't use very high quality glue, and this little piece here with two of the stars has fallen off. In addition, this feature, which was attached to the top of the box, has also fallen off. Let me pull this out. You can see here where it was before it fell off, and you can even match up just like this. You can see it'll kind of sit there temporarily, but it appears as though I didn't use glue but relied on the paint itself to hold it in place. And as you can tell here, there doesn't look to be a lot of contact surface area, and so it just didn't stand the test of time too well, and at some point during a few moves has fallen off. I'm going to start with the repair of the constellation arm, which is a little more involved. Because it's such a precarious attachment, there's very small surface area. I'm going to be using super glue. I think last time I just used wood glue, and I believe this was like a little piece of bamboo, and so as you can imagine, the wood glue was not the best choice for such a small contact area. But before I attach it, I actually need to look up the constellation Aquarius so I can get this angle right. I forget exactly how it went. It doesn't need to be exactly right, but I want to get it generally correct. As I mentioned, the constellation is Aquarius, and I needed to look it up in order to get the angle right. If you're into astronomy at all, then you likely know the stars that comprise constellations, and the lines that are drawn to connect them often vary from source to source. Here's an accurate star map of Aquarius. Let's remove some of the clutter, leaving just the constellation. As you may be able to tell, this version looks quite different than the version in my box. Let's start by removing these green lines. Okay. Then I'll replace them with some blue lines that reflect the model I used for the box. My apologies to those little stars on the side. They seem to have just gotten left out. Alright, so now I have a guide for placement of the broken pieces. I actually printed out the image that I showed you on a piece of paper, and that's what I'm going to be using as sort of a guide when I glue it back in. And given how permanent super glue is, I really want to get it right the first time. Initially, I was planning on sort of propping up the arm with a couple of Scrabble pieces, but I realized that the glue dries so quickly. I believe it's like 15 to 30 seconds you're supposed to hold it in place. Then I'm not going to stress about that. I'm just going to hold it in place with my fingers. Okay, in order to prevent super glue from getting on my finger, I'm actually going to tape up my fingertip here with a little bit of blue painter's tape, which I use for just about everything, including OSHA protection, apparently. Okay, we got that. Now, okay, when I glue it, there's essentially two spots. There's a spot at the bottom where this little wooden dowel has snapped off, and then there's the contact point between the bamboo and the actual painted blue stick here. And it looks as though the angle is just kind of roughly about there. So that's what we'll be going for. I think the best thing is to put both drops on here and just go with it. Just like that. And I'll just hold it there. Probably do a little time lapse with the video. Okay, it seems good enough for me to let go, but I am going to let it run for about 10 minutes before I start recording again. Okay, I think that's dried enough to move on to the next step, which will be attaching this up top. I'm going to try to be very careful not to go near that little arm because there's so much leverage on it. I'm afraid I'm going to snap it off again. Yeah, let's go back to matching this up. You can see there's a little bit of remnant of paint in the front, and it matches a lack of paint here, so it's very easy to tell how it went. Now, if this was a very clean design piece of artwork, I might worry about that crack showing where it broke off. But given how rough this is, it fits it perfectly. I'd actually kind of like to amplify it if I could. I might leave it a little loose just to show off. I don't know. I'll press it in there as tight as I can, it looks like. So, and I'm not as stressed about the bond here. The surface area is quite large that I'll be working with, and I can even sort of fill in that hole a little bit and it'll grab onto that. So I won't be needing to use super glue again. I'm just going to whip out some Gorilla Wood glue here. That should be fine. Before I add the glue, it is interesting for me to look back. I'd forgotten how I made this, and it looks like it's just 4 pieces of quarter round that I've trimmed down into little triangles and pieced together into a square. And then I assume that's just a wooden ball I've attached on the top to create that sort of architectural element. Pretty neat. Okay, let's do this. I'll work from the center out, just because I definitely don't want any glue to come out from the edges. Because even though this is a very rustic aesthetic, I think this glue dries a little bit glossy, and this does not want gloss anywhere. I think that would kind of stand out in a negative way. So let's get this in here. Perfect fit. And I have a little piece of wood I'm just going to wedge in here, which should hold it in place perfectly. And then we're going to need to give that quite a while to dry, and then I will come back and show you the finished product. I've given it about 45 minutes, which should be ample time for this to have set. I won't put any pressure on it or anything because I'm sure it's not completely dry, but it should be plenty enough to finish the video and show off the finished product. And there it is. All right, it looks great. And you can see on the constellation itself how it was done. There's little dowels underneath some of the stars that keep it floating, and then some of the other stars are just up in the air. There are dowels here, 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 and then on these end 2 pieces. And then the rest are just floating, like I said. I'm surprised that this top piece wasn't the one that broke off. It's so long, there's so much leverage on this little joint right there, but it was this one. If you're curious about the process I used to make the box, I took white house paint and I just poured it in the bottom here. And I had this photo from a magazine, I believe, and I placed it on the wet paint, and then I rapidly dried it using a hairdryer so that the paint would crack. You can see the results here. And then after that was done, I came back in and put in the constellation, and I had some press type that I put in the title up here at the top. That's how I did that. I've got some other old boxes from this time period. I don't know if I'll be showing them off on the channel or not. I know at least one of them does need some repairs, so maybe it'll be the next one to pull into the shop. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you the next time.